Start. Okay. You guys are up? Yeah, cool. I declare open this public hearing of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Resources. Inquiry into food and beverage manufacturing in Australia. I acknowledge that where we meet today is the traditional land of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. In accordance with the committee's resolution, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and proof and official transcript of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. So I'll call our first witnesses, and I welcome Lark Distilling Co. for the Hansard record. Would you please each state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Hi, my name is Dan Knight, and I'm appearing as a member of the leadership team from Lark Distilling with a focus on hospitality. So I'm here to help you with any questions related to the value out of the whisky industry and tourism and hospitality.
Cool.
Hello, I'm Greg Ewan, so I'm also a member of the Lark leadership team, oversee ops and supply chain. I'm here to assist with knowledge on manufacturing and sustainability.
I'm Satya Sharma, Chief Executive of Lark Distilling Company and also a member of the Australian Distillers Association and Spirits and Cocktails.
Fantastic. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise you these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Satch, would you like to start with opening remarks?
Thank you, Committee, for the opportunity to appear today. As I mentioned, my name is Satya Sharma, Chief Executive of Lark Distilling Company. Joining me today are members of my very talented leadership team who you met yesterday, Greg Ewan, Head of Production, and Dan Knight, Head of Hospitality, the other way around. Lark is more than a distillery. Since 1992, it has led the renaissance of Australian craft distilling, supporting, my apologies, I've lost my train of thought. Since 1992, it has led the renaissance of Australian craft distilling, supporting the growth of the industry in Tasmania to over 77 distilleries and 700 throughout Australia. Lark celebrates distinctly Australian and Tasmanian ingredients to create world-class whisky, gin and liqueurs. The cool climate of Tasmania, pristine waters, amazing casks and rich agricultural input allow Lark to value add through manufacturing, creating innovative products that showcase provenance and genuinely set Tasmanian whisky apart on the world stage. We know we can't out-Scotch Scotch, but Lark has shown what is possible when we embrace our differences through innovative expressions like our Canotto citrus casks whisky that simply cannot be made in Scotland due to the restrictions on products. There is growing consumer demand of New World whisky as consumers diversify into new flavours, regions and products from emerging whisky markets. Australia is uniquely positioned to seize this opportunity, but we must act now. Research from the Mandela Partners shows the Australian spirits industry could grow to become a $1 billion export industry by 2035. But to seize this opportunity, urgent intervention is needed to address the challenges that are holding back our potential. Lark's experience of accessing export markets as we expand into Southeast Asia shows that it's difficult to go it alone. Coordination of this effort across the Australian spirits category is needed to build forward momentum to harness the opportunity. A body like Spirits Australia, following the example of Wine Australia, can help to achieve this, allowing the Australian economy to reap significant rewards. Such a body could help in creating awareness of our emerging industry through export promotion in markets such as Asia, building skills and capability to enhance our industry, such as distilling and coopers, the importance of which the committee saw firsthand yesterday, and maintaining product integrity through developing technical standards which will enhance consumer confidence. The success of our industry will deliver more jobs and inbound tourism at unique sites like the Lark Distillery at Pontville, which the committee visited yesterday, and in hospitality venues like our Hobart destination, The Still, which provides an opportunity for consumers to experience our products in cocktails that are accessible, even those new to whisky. What your peers in parliamentary committees did a generation ago to recommend coordination and support of the Australian wine industry is precisely what Australian distillers like Lark need right now. We urge you to seize this opportunity and we welcome your questions. Thank you.
Dan or Brian. Let's go with the first one. The one I want to talk about was the carbon neutrality of the distillery. Can you tell us how you've achieved that and what was the sort of process to get to that point?
Yes, no problem at all. So we are part of the climate active system. So what we have to do with that is obviously there's a fair bit of work that goes into trying to work out all of the emissions that our company, our organisation has produced. So it's not just manufacturing, it's through commuting and through air travel, et cetera, et cetera. So we use third-party contractors to help us do those calculations and work out exactly how much emissions that we have generated, and then we offset that carbon through the purchase of accredited carbon credits, which puts us back to net zero.
Sure. Al?
Just going back to your opportunities overseas, and it was great to see your leadership roles in sustainability, and I'm just checking it's coping, is that right? The manufacturing of the barrels? Coopering, there we go. Yeah, so it's really good to see you bringing some of those skills back and looking at ways you can increase skills development here in Tasmania. So how do you engage with Austrade, particularly focusing on overseas and your potential for export? How do you engage with Austrade?
So we do participate and obviously have proactive conversations with Austrade. I suppose the initial and most important point there is we're a very small voice, and potentially within the priorities of Austrade, we probably aren't, and we definitely aren't in the same sort of stratosphere as wine. At this stage, what we've had is I won't say minimal, but limited support with Austrade, and I think the opportunity remains that distillers like Lark, with something like Spirits Australia and the assistance of Austrade, can really get our message across around the awareness that we've talked about in building a significant industry, which we have right here at home.
And would you see that operating like Wine Australia and maybe co-locating at trade shows and that sort of thing? Like,
absolutely.
What do you see that doing?
Yeah, so I think within the same remit, like Wine Australia, that is a fantastic blueprint for us to follow. It catapulted our peers in the wine industry, and that's what we're seeking to sort of pull together today. In order to drive a coordinated effort. One of our peers from Starwood, David Vitale, spoke to the committee previously about arriving at a trade show with a trestle table and seeing pavilions from other nations, but also Wine Australia. That share of voice and that awareness that we're talking about is absolutely what Spirits Australia could achieve. And that coordinated effort on promoting and building the awareness of an industry that we think has significant potential. We talked about the Mandela report earlier. A 1 billion export industry by 2035 is something that we think we can unlock.
That's a great opportunity. And I liked one of the words you used yesterday, the co-opetition. So how does the distillery industry, particularly here in Tasmania, work together? You had some great stories yesterday of... Yeah.
So we've got, obviously, through Australian distillers, but also the TWSA, we do come together to further Tasmanian whiskey and also, obviously, Australian spirits, Tasmanian spirits also, obviously. The cooperation across our industry in terms of sharing insights, sharing knowledge, but also assisting, which was the ethos of Bill Lark when he founded Lark, has been a way that we've come together. But what we're trying to do is coordinate that in a greater way and take our story to the world. And I think some of the bits that we've talked about in terms of Spirits Australia associated with standards, protecting what's really important. You saw some of those wonderful barrels. We can only do that in Australia. Using that Apera and those tawny casks and telling those stories is something that we really value.
Actually, to start with, I'd just like to thank you for having us out there yesterday. That was really amazing to see what you're doing, and you've got a really well-run organisation out there. So in your submission, you asked for a review on the spirits excise regime. So what do you think Australia needs to do to change the alcohol tax that we currently have?
I think we need a coordinated effort. What we've sought as an industry is a pause in order to be able to drive, I suppose, an appropriate excise tax. I mean, an analogy I use is we started in 1992. We've got a product called the Legacy. It's a 20-year-old product. In that time, there's been 39 or 40 excise increases. If you imagine putting that down and trying to understand what that price to consumer would be in 20 years, it's a very difficult proposition for us as an industry. The request is obviously to create an element of a pause to be able to have a look at what we do with the excise regime, but also fairness. A standard drink in spirits is 5 times more than wine, is 2.5 times more than draft beer. But a standard drink is a standard drink, and creating that is going to be an important part. I mean, Dan, maybe firsthand from the hospitality sector.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of hospitality, if you look at the cost of goods, selling whiskey, the cost of goods are 59% higher than selling beer, and 10% higher than selling wine. So that just drives the cost to consumer. And I think if we're trying to grow the industry, people only have a certain amount of wallet share to give. So if things became cheaper, it would open up the market for Australian distilled spirits.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you guys for having us yesterday. It was cool. One of the best things we've done so far on this committee, I think. So, which is good. Just to go back to Spirits Australia for a sec and setting one up. What do you guys expect from us there, from government? What would you expect?
Well, I suppose a key bit would be ensuring that we've got the funding to do that, a coordinated effort, and we think that's as we spoke to the committee last time, very, very doable within the regime that we've got in terms of excise, but equally talking through those elements that we've called out, that coordinated promotional activity, that I think is one of the greatest things we could do with Spirits Australia. And ensuring that those skills and capabilities which we saw yesterday that are desperately needed in a growing industry is going to be critical. In addition to ensuring those technical standards to create consumer confidence is what we would come together and do.
Yep. And what kind of cost do you think it would be to government? I
think within the total excise regime, we could be cost neutral based on the fact that we're paying the level of excise we are today.
Yep.
I think if you draw that off against the export opportunity of 2035 and $1 billion industry, the employment, the taxes we'll all pay as an industry will more than wash its face in my opinion. Now, I haven't done the maths to be able to do that, but I think anecdotally we can probably agree there's a lot of growth that we will all benefit from employment to also corporate taxes.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. With like a number of people have talked about the pausing of indexation for a period of 2 years. Have you done analysis on what that will do?
Yeah.
The cost, how it impacts your business, and
Yeah, and I'll talk more broadly, and I'll use a real case study, which was the UK. A pause took place in the UK, and the overall impact has meant that the government has benefited from that. Our modelling as an association has shown that if we do that pause, we don't see the impact on excise coming down. What we've seen is as excise has gone up, the actual overall excise collected by the government has potentially stopped or reduced over time because of the reduction in excise revenue through volumes. So there is a live case study which I'm sure Spirits Australia. I've gone far too ahead. The Australian Distillers Association and Spirits and Cocktails can share and have in their submissions.
So there was a bit of a discussion about staffing. How, excuse me, how do you go about getting experienced staff to work in your sector too, and what sort of problems do you face with getting international people in with visas?
Yeah, Greg, do you want to take that?
Yes, I can jump in on that one. So it's quite a young industry here, especially compared to the industry that's in Scotland and in Japan. So as we're trying to scale, we found that we don't really have the skill sets required to understand how some of these distilleries work at scale. So I'll break that into 2 points. There's the one which is the sort of the visa side of things, and then the second one, which is the skill set. So a lot of our skills that we have to try and generate to be able to run, we have to try and develop in-house. So that involves distillers, which takes us about 6 months to a year to try and train up. Coopers, as you would have seen yesterday, we've got them to a point where they can help us out, but they're still not a qualified Cooper. So there's a huge amount that we have to invest just to get them to that bare basics. And currently in Australia, there's no real accredited program nationally for distilling and for coopering. So we're sort of making do, and that involves some of the in-house training that we do, but also looking to overseas for some of the diplomas that are out there for distilling. For example, there's the GCD. The second point, of course, is we're trying to find the right skill set to grow the industry. For that, we're trying to find the right people that have management experience managing some of these large distilleries in Scotland and Japan and around the world. But the problem is we're finding that the people of the age that have that seniority and that understanding, that experience are... But at the moment, we've got one person, they're 1 year above the age restriction, so we're having a huge amount of challenge trying to get them a visa that will allow them to stay here for the long term, to try and grow our business for the long term. I think with whiskey, we've seen, when we've spoken about how long we have to look into the future, so we're trying to make 5-10 year plans. That's very difficult to do when we're looking at the staffing skill that we have with a 2 year limit on it.
Yeah, no. Have you talked to your local federal member about that visa issue you have?
We're in progress with working with as many people as we can.
Okay, good.
And you're the first certified carbon neutral distillery in Australia or in Tasmania?
In Australia.
In Australia. How have you done that, and what are you looking to do in the future, and what sort of things do you think government can help you with that?
So first...
It's probably the Parliament.
It's a green bell, we don't have to go. It's all right.
I'll just ignore it.
Yeah.
So first up, we became the first carbon neutral distillery in Australia just through that government climate active scheme, which allowed us to offset the carbon. It's one of the more rigorous ones in the world, so it's actually quite well renowned. But obviously that's just one sort of step. It's a step that we could take when we are quite small. As we try to scale up, it becomes harder and harder, and the cost of carbon is going up, and carbon credits is going up, and it's a voluntary thing. So it sort of reduces our incentives as we sort of go on. As we grow, it just becomes more and more expensive. So what we're trying to do at the moment, obviously we want to be a lot better than that. We don't want to just offset our carbon, so we're trying to look into the future for what we can do. But there's a little bit of a gap that we've got. So when we're really small, it's affordable to be able to offset our carbon. When we're really big, there's technology out there that can do a lot of the changes that we want, such as, I think I mentioned yesterday in passing, looking at biomass boilers compared to natural gas boilers. So using waste products from different industries to generate our power. But the cost difference of that is huge. So you're looking at, for a gas boiler, $58,000, and for a biomass boiler, $700,000. So there's a big gap as we sort of are in the medium-sized manufacturing space where we don't really have much technology that allows us to, cost-competitive technology that allows us to sort of reduce our carbon output. So we're doing a fair bit of work to see what we can do, not just looking at some of this technology, not just looking at some of the biofuel alternatives, but also sort of our wider impact. So we've been having early discussions with Sea Forest for trying to offset the methane from cows that we feed the grain to. So we're trying to see any little thing that we can do. In terms of where the help that we would need, that will come into any sort of R&D and investment in that sort of industry size for how can we drop the cost or make some of this technology more accessible to manufacturing, and also how can we build the supply chains that are associated with that. For example, we investigated hydrogen when we were looking at building the new distillery. Everything was quite exciting, but there's obviously no hydrogen supply network, and it doesn't look like there's going to be one anytime soon. There's a lot of talk about bio LPG here in Tassie, but once again, there's no real suppliers for it. So there's a lot of talk, but we need to start seeing some action for us to actually be able to capitalise on some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to add is, while we are taking those steps internally as a company, some of the technology that we could invest in would help the industry as a whole. We believe that it's a competitive advantage that consumers genuinely value. And one distillery alone, probably difficult, but the R&D and the innovation that we can put into our manufacturing across 700 distillers has a much louder voice and something that we can take to the world in a very, very competitive way.
Have you looked at like clean energy finance and the National Reconstruction Fund?
An arena, maybe?
Yeah, there's opportunities to help funding and support that sort. I mean, that's their creep.
Not in too much detail, but we are starting to try and reach out to some of the government bodies to see what help and what assistance they are. Even through some of the contacts that they have, it's been good for us to try and work out what's possible and see something that would actually stack up in terms of financial investment for us as well.
Do you guys market that you have green whiskey? Because your power here is all done not through coal-fired power stations like we have on the mainland. You guys are a green area for energy. Do you guys market that at all?
We do talk about being certified carbon neutral.
Yep.
What we take to the world and what people so the answer on that, do we market it? No.
Yep.
We talk about that neutral status that we've got. But we do talk about the environmental conditions that we mature our whiskey in, from the water, the air, and the climate. And we talk about a sense of a place, the flavours that we bring to the world, which are uniquely Australian, and the incredible people that help make it. So to answer that question, overtly no, but we do talk about the component parts in our marketing,
Yeah, okay.
particularly as we've gone to places like Asia.
Because that could be another marketing tool for you guys, because obviously the big talk is green steel. Anything you can do in the industry that is green to make sure that you're using renewable power, which you guys are using, to do what you do. So it would definitely be a hit, I reckon.
Yeah, cool.
We use a mix of renewable power and LPG.
Yep.
The challenge that we've found with using pure renewable power is just our location. So as we're starting to look more regional, the infrastructure is not really there to be able to support it, which is a bit of a challenge that we're facing at the moment. So to use the Pontville site as an example, we were looking at upgrading to the new distillery and upgrading the power supply to that, but we'd have to upgrade all the power supply back to Bridgewater, which is almost in Hobart, for us to be able to utilise that green electricity. So that's one of the challenges that we've been having to face.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I just ask you about your experience in exporting overseas? And this is, I guess, follow-up from yesterday's discussion around shifting products into Southeast Asia. What have been the successes and challenges that you faced in doing that and accessing those markets?
Yeah, I think it's a journey that we are very, very early in our sort of outreach. The challenges are creating the awareness of where we're from. Scotch has been around for a very long time. Japanese whiskey has been around for a very long time. But if you sit in Australia and you talk about what we've got that the rest of the world doesn't, it's not that we're short of stories. It's not that we're short of amazing product. It's just that we don't have a megaphone. Right now, you've got Lark going out to the world, along with a minority of those 700, trying to fly the flag for both Tasmania and Australia. But we are coming up against juggernauts, people that have been in the industry for 200 years. Some of our competitors internationally, in Europe particularly, are celebrating 300 years. So we are a embryonic stage in our development. The thing that catapults us and drives speed to market will be creating that awareness of what we uniquely bring to the world. What that translates to in very practical terms is export conversations with distributors, ensuring that we plug in and explain to them what we bring, which is New World whiskey. We have no intention of trying to be or emulate something that has existed for 300 years. We think we've got a fantastic story to tell and take to the world. But the truth is, no one really knows that we make whiskey. There is it's known here in Australia, but you take that to the world and it's a aha moment. So why can you guys make great whiskey? Because we've got fantastic conditions and an amazing sense of place. So the awareness is the critical point. And the second part is obviously our economies of scale. We are at a cost disadvantage because we have yet to hit those economies to be able to drive future export conversations.
And your whiskey's stacking up very well. You were talking about some of your awards yesterday.
Absolutely.
Some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, and on the global stage, right? I mean, I think one of the things, us along with many other Australian distillers, we've been very, very well represented across the world. We enter some of the most prestigious awards, and we come out winning golds and winning ongoing medals. It's not just 1 year and it's a one and done. We've been consistently doing that. But again, it's making sure that those awards translate into people knowing we've won those awards, and that comes with that megaphone of a loud, united voice.
Okay, I asked lots yesterday.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Very good, Rob. Just before we stop, I suppose the key thing for me, if I may, just from a closing perspective, I think what you saw yesterday through that manufacturing process was grain, the king of grains, malted barley. The innovation we've brought along that way to turn that grain into what you saw in the still, the component parts along the way of making whiskey, new make spirit, which our distillers so skillfully create. Those skills are very, very limited in Australia. You saw the Coopers and those amazing barrels from Seppelsfield. These amazing barrels that can't be replicated anywhere in the world, and the skill that goes into building those up through our Coopers and those maturation warehouses that you walked through. You saw every component part of what we have as an industry, and then you experience the end consumer product. All of those component parts are things that we want to take to the world. We think there is a time limit as we're trying to fight every other new world whiskey that's coming onto the market. The bits that we can do today that will be practical steps. Spirits Australia, we genuinely believe is a pivotal moment and a pivotal organisation that can help us grow. The excise pause that we've talked about in order to create a sustainable excise regime and that reinvestment into our industry, I think, is an extremely important one. So if we can pull all of those things together, I think we've got this incredible opportunity for jobs in Australia and further manufacturing advancements that we would love to take to the world. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript for any correction of matters of fact, and thank you so much for your time, both yesterday and today as well. Really.
Thank you for making it. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
We've got 10:40. Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. open the public hearing of the Standing Committee, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Resources inquiry into food and beverage manufacturing in Australia. In accordance with our committee's resolution, the hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament website. Proof of the official transcript of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I also remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report proceedings. With that, I call a representative from Cadbury. So for the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear?
Sure. The name is Stephanie Saliba and I'm the Director of Corporate and Government Affairs.
Thank you, Stephanie. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, it should advise you the hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament. Consequently, they warrant the same respect as proceedings of the Parliament itself. Giving false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. So would you care to make some introductory remarks before we proceed to questions?
Sure thing, thank you. So on behalf of Cadbury, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the committee today. As custodians of Cadbury and as one of the largest food manufacturers in Australia, our success over the past 100 years has been built on our people. Their ability to innovate and adapt to change, to meet consumer expectations and stay ahead of changing industry trends is critical to our ongoing success. For generations, we've been employing thousands of Australians and, importantly, supporting local communities and local producers, including dairy farmers here in Tasmania and sugar growers in Queensland, with our brands such as Cadbury, the Natural Confectionery Company and Pascal, which play a significant role in the fabric of the nation. These strengths position us to thrive in both domestic and international markets. Our workforce is not just highly skilled, but also deeply knowledgeable in food technology and manufacturing. The expertise is not just a part, but the backbone of our innovation and high production standards, instilling confidence in our consumers and partners alike. Our reputation for safe, reliable and high quality products stems from our stringent standards and a steadfast goal towards clean, green production. This commitment gives Australian products a competitive edge in the global market and resonates with the growing global demand for sustainable practices. Our company in Australia has invested more than $400 million in upgrades to our production facilities across Tasmania, Victoria and South Australia over the past 7 years, resulting in an annual $1 billion gross value addition to the Australian economy. However, we are facing significant headwinds and must address several critical challenges facing our business so we can continue to invest in growing our business and producing Australia's favourite snacks here in Australia. High operating costs, particularly transport and energy, present a major obstacle. The urgency of this situation is clear and would greatly benefit from a cohesive energy strategy that ensures cost efficiency, reliability and investment certainty while reducing energy prices for businesses and consumers. Regulatory complexity also poses a significant burden. While high food safety standards are crucial, the complex regulatory environment increases compliance costs and operational challenges. The importance of streamlining these regulations and embracing enabling technologies cannot be overstated, and it is essential to fostering a more competitive industry. In response to these challenges, we have taken proactive steps. We're investing in sustainable circular packaging solutions and collaborating with others to innovate in recycling, waste and emissions reduction. Our recent initiatives include switching to renewable electricity for all our Victorian plants, helping to reduce our total Australian emissions by over 60% since 2018. We've partnered with Amcor to invest in Licella to fund one of the first soft plastic advanced recycling facilities here in Australia. And we've also commenced a dairy emissions reduction journey with our Cadbury farmers here in Tassie to baseline their on-farm carbon footprint and develop a pathway to implement sustainable practices. We work closely with our research and development team to develop new products that cater to consumer demand for better-for-you snacking options. We recently launched products such as the Cadbury Dairy Milk Velvet with 40% more cocoa and 25% more milk, and 50% reduced sugar snacks from the Natural Confectionery Company. We ask that the government support measures that seek to address the rising cost of manufacturing, the need to upgrade and automate manufacturing infrastructure, and the need to invest in projects such as sustainable sustainable farming practices, labelling technology, packaging innovation and emissions reduction, and support the ongoing success of our industry locally and on the global stage. In conclusion, our Australian operations have immense potential and we want to be here for another 100 years. By addressing high operating costs, streamlining regulations and improving infrastructure, we can unlock this potential and ensure sustainable growth. We're grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today and to work together to enhance our industry's competitiveness and resilience. So once again, thank you for the opportunity to contribute, and I'd welcome any questions.
Cool, thank you. 1938, you started production in Tasmania.
No, 1922, yeah. So we celebrated 100 years of manufacturing 2 years ago. I want to be here for another 100.
Cool. So what are the advantages or disadvantages that you think Australia has as far as food manufacturing and beverage manufacturing, and how does it compare to sort of your international operations?
Yeah. I'd say that the factors that provide opportunities also equally provide challenges. So if we look at our skilled workforce, luckily Australia is highly skilled with lots of access to expertise in manufacturing and food technology. And that helps us support innovation by creating new products that meet our consumer needs, which help grow our business and help maintain our manufacturing footprint here. But on the flip side of that, we are a high labour cost market, and many countries, especially Asia and countries in the Middle East, have significantly lower labour costs than we do here in Australia. We often say in a developing country, if you have a manufacturing problem or your business is growing quickly, you tend to put more people onto that problem or opportunity to fix it. Here in Australia, we have to think differently and think, okay, how can we invest in technology, digitise our manufacturing processes, and invest in capital to help support that growth or to solve that problem? I'd say another disadvantage here in Australia is, I'd say, the difference in challenge between metropolitan locations and regional cities, and Tasmania here specifically. Access to labour in our regional plant in South Australia is very difficult. It's hard to attract talent, particularly in skilled and managerial roles, to move to regional areas. And here in Tasmania, the cost of living used to be, I'd say, quite, the lower cost of living tended to be quite attractive for people moving from the mainland. But now with the cost of housing here in Tassie skyrocketing, it no longer has that advantage to attract people from the mainland. So in terms of another advantage, we've got a very strong agricultural base. We're very lucky that we can source many of the ingredients that we need for local production locally as well. All our fresh milk comes from within Tasmania. All our sugar comes from far north Queensland. But given the vastness of our geographic spread, the cost of energy and transport plays a crucial role to supporting that agricultural base. We're moving sugar up and down the country. We're exporting goods from Tasmania to the mainland. We're also exporting the products we make for the New Zealand market from Australia. We're importing cocoa. So we're reliant on many international and local transport links. And it is quite a fragile, I'd say, transport system as well. If we have a flood in central Australia, it often means that it's difficult to get food from the eastern side of the country to the western side of the country, as we've experienced for quite a few years now. So I do feel that the geographic location and that stress on transport infrastructure does provide some real challenges for us. On brand trust, Australian products are known to be clean, green, safe, and particularly in developing countries, they look for that made in Australia product. But then with that, it comes the regulatory support and sometimes burden that we have to put in to ensure that we can That also comes with complexity and cost, and sometimes that cost can be avoided with, I'd say, better planning from sort of a whole of government approach to ensure that rather than investing in compliance cost, we can invest in advancing the manufacturing facilities in our plants. And then on energy, I must say I find it hard to find the advantages of energy at the moment. Energy costs are high and increasing fairly substantially. And as a global organisation, we have a commitment to get to net zero by 2050. And here in Australia, whilst we are investing in sort of reducing the amount of energy we create, moving to renewable sources where we can, it is a bit patchy in terms of how to access that renewable electricity. And reliability of energy supply is also a challenge as well.
You were talking about regulatory complexity and streamlining that. What specifically, what levels of government affect you the most?
Yeah, I'd say like food labelling is an interesting space that has multiple different departments feeding into that. So if I think back to about 10 years ago, we were going through country of origin labelling changes. And we moved through that process and sort of had a bit of a sigh of relief. But then the changes sort of kept coming from multiple government departments. And when I look at our sort of international experiences, I'd say the frequency of labelling change in Australia is much higher than other markets. So after we got through country of origin labelling changes, we moved on to plain English allergen labelling changes. So that was standardising the way allergens appeared on packaging. And for us, we set up a bespoke project team to really micromanage those changes. We've got 700 different product lines across our portfolio. And each time we have to change essentially the stencil of a piece of packaging. That costs $5,000 each product. So that's a $3.5 million cost to change. We were able to do the plain English allergen change with about a $2 million cost, as we were trying to sort of tag on that change to other changes to minimise cost. But as we were partway through that process, Red Cycle collapsed, and then we had the need to start removing the Red Cycle logo off our packaging. So that's another change that needs to be enacted. And now as we hear about health star ratings becoming mandatory, and certain voices indicating that maybe the algorithm that sits behind that needing to change, it makes us nervous that we need to go through sort of another packaging change. And as I said, for us, a full packaging change across our portfolio is $3.5 million. If you added that with each sort of food manufacturer across the country, it's just millions and millions of dollars that could be spent in investing in their facilities and their businesses. And look, many of these changes are needed and warranted, but our preference would be that perhaps we can have a joined up coordinated approach and maybe labelling changes happen at a particular time and all changes get enacted then. And would really welcome the government to look at digital labelling as well. I'd say pre-COVID, we thought it would be impossible for every consumer to have access to a mobile phone, but I think COVID showed us that most consumers did, as they had to embrace QR codes and COVID certificates and the like. And I think there's opportunity to look at digital labelling, not just for compliance and safety information, but to also meet consumers' needs that are emerging around them wanting to understand where did the particular ingredients come from in their product, where were they processed, how were they made, what's the country of origin of each ingredient. Consumers are also starting to sort of request information on the carbon impact of their product as well. That's a lot of information and expectation which can't be covered on a piece of packaging on a food or beverage product. So we think there's real merit to explore digital labelling via a QR code or some other form in the future.
And that allows you just to update on the website when there's new information and not change your packaging.
Absolutely.
You've already touched on this a bit, but like with your workforce, the skills. So how, do you get many people in from overseas? Do you have issues with the visa system? And where would the bulk of your people really come from, just like your skilled workers?
Yeah, no, like the majority of our workers come locally from within Australia. So quite proudly, we've got sort of quite a high reputation for our manufacturing excellence. So it's not an easy ask to have people come and work for us. For example, here in Claremont, I don't think we've had to put an ad out to recruit for many, many years, because there's a bit of I'd say a very strong family link, where people know that their family members have worked with Cadbury, they've had a career where their jobs have changed, and they're quite keen to enter the workforce as well. So visas and overseas sourcing of labour hasn't been much of a challenge for us. I'd say once people come into our business, I'd say that's where we probably still haven't completely solved that career path and trajectory. So many of our workers at the Cadbury plant, for example, have sort of 10 to 20 years of experience. And when they started in our facility, there were many more roles that were highly laborious and quite repetitive. But as we've invested in technology, the nature of the job has changed. And rather than being an operator on the line, they are the operator, the owner, the maintainer, the fixer, to make sure that the lines keep running for as long as possible. They're now skilled to step in and do basic maintenance to make sure that continues. So they are in higher paying roles that require different sets of skills. And as we look at Industry 4.0 principles and digitising further, that skill evolution will need to continue to evolve. A lot of that support is done, I'd say, on the job, but we're quite keen to collaborate with government, higher education and TAFE providers to look at how can sort of the manufacturing worker of the future be someone who is trained in sort of digital technology, line maintenance, etc. Because, that's where we think sort of future operators are going.
Yeah, I think just from talking to people right across the country, people think, if you're in manufacturing, that it's driving a forklift or, but it is those really technical roles these days, particularly with the robotics and all the rest of it. And with all that robotics and the upgrades that you have, do you find that that's increased your production significantly also?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for us, we're in a price sensitive category, so we have to work really hard to not pass on unnecessary costs to our consumers to ensure that they can continue buying them and treating them. So we work really hard on productivity, and a lot of that productivity comes from investing in technology, automating processes in our facilities, and also digitising further as well. And we've invested $400 million, but there's a lot more investment that needs to come, particularly as we look at moving to, say, cleaner, greener ways of working, moving from gas to renewable electricity sources. There's a lot of change that still needs to happen within the facilities. I'd say we're definitely not done. No. There's a big journey to go on still.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
G'day, how are you? Thank you for coming today. My question is around, we have everybody that runs a decent sized business or a small business or any kind of business in Australia comes into these committees and tells us the costs and wages for employees is too high. What can we do about it? Because everyone comes in, I haven't asked this question to anyone else before yet, but I'm going to continue to ask this question. What can we as a government do about that? Because the costs have got to be high, because the products cost so much. Everything here has a cost and we have to still pay for things. So what do you think, from your point of view, we can do?
Yeah, very good question. I'd say the government being supportive of the changing workforce is quite critical. As I mentioned, our operators have gone on an evolution, and their wages have risen because of that, and deservedly so. They've gone from sort of simple manual repetitive tasks to sort of being empowered and enacted with the knowledge to manage their lines, maintain their lines, which does provide sort of great productivity benefits for us and allows us to grow our business and our volume output. So I'd say it's deservedly so that the wages are continuing to grow. But I think that government and industry more broadly recognising that jobs are different would be quite helpful, rather than sort of focusing just on numeric dollar growth. It's on skill growth at the same time.
So investing in people, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, excellent. And so what R&D work are you guys currently working on to make your process more efficient and to get those skilled workers even more skilled?
Yeah. So in Australia, we've got a 40-person odd research and development team based for just the local market. And then further to that, they've got a global network of research and development team members, which they can tap into. For us, like, we're in the snacking segment, and consumers are snacking more and more. And they're looking for different, I'd say, needs for their snacks. So it's not just about having a sweet treat after dinner. Like athletic people are looking for a protein bar or something to sort of refuel a whole heap of energy. And then consumers are also looking at products where they know they're clean and green, and they're sustainably made as well. So we've got quite, I'd say, an evolving consumer mindset around what they expect from their food. I'd say we've also got a cost of living crisis that impacts our consumers and their ability to afford products to go into their shopping basket. Like, when consumers have less to spend overall, they have less to spend on our products as well. So our research and development team is very focused on how do we meet these emerging consumer needs in a way that is affordable. And at the same time, we've got like significant input cost pressures. Like, the cost of gas for us has increased 100% in the last 12 months. The cost of cocoa on global markets has quadrupled this year. And there's only...
World shortage.
There is, yeah, there is.
Terrible headlines that we could be out of chocolate.
And what happened with that? How come that happened?
So 75% of the world's cocoa is grown in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and they've had a really bad cocoa growing season because of climate change and a tree root disease that's impacted the yield. So early signs are indicating that the mid-crop for next year is looking okay, but we'll get more clarity on September on what that looks like. But yeah, the cost of cocoa has increased significantly. And for us, we can't absorb all that, and we can't pass all that on to our consumers as well. So our research and development team has a very big role on looking at where can we get efficiencies, where can we get productivity without compromising the taste and quality and trust of our product.
Can you guys grow cocoa here in Australia?
There is a small cocoa plantation in Queensland. Cadbury did partner with them in the 1990s in a very sort of early stage pilot. The challenge is the volume needed, and we just don't have, I'd say, the space, the technology and the ability to grow Cadbury's cocoa needs in Queensland, unfortunately.
Okay.
A lot is required.
Yep.
So for safety's sake and for ecological sake, we should eat white chocolate.
So then you leave more for me.
Works out well.
Yeah.
And with how you're saying about everyone wants cleaner, greener as well. So with packaging, a lot of your packaging is not recyclable. And we know that through another committee we're on, because there's a film on it that doesn't get recycled. So you can't recycle that product. How are you guys going with that?
Yes, so 2 years ago we sourced some recycled content from Europe. So the plastic on your Cadbury block now is at least 50% recycled content, and we were able to get that resin from Europe. But at the time that we announced that, we said we're sourcing from Europe at the moment because there's no local source, but our desire is to be able to get that material in Australia and for it to be reprocessed in Australia. So we also partnered with Amcor to invest in Licella. So Licella is looking at building a chemical recycling plant in Melbourne. They have a pilot plant in New South Wales at the moment. And for those unfamiliar with advanced chemical recycling, what it does is it takes the soft plastic, it melts it back down to the original oil form, and then turns that back into soft plastic that's food grade, that can be in contact with food, and it can be recycled again and again and again. So our desire is for us to invest in that local capability to make sure that the plastic that we're putting on the market is being collected. That's a big challenge at the moment, is being recycled through the advanced chemical process and turning back into food grade plastic that we can continue to use. We'll continue to source from Europe for the moment, but as I said, our desire is absolutely for there to be a circular loop in Australia for that to happen. On climate reporting, we're very supportive of climate disclosures. So we've been watching very closely sort of the passage of that bill through Parliament. But I'd say Australia being one of the first in the world to go down sort of climate disclosures and Scope 3 reporting is challenging for a global organisation. We're learning along the way. We're not sure sort of whether local reporting or global reporting will be required. And it's adding a lot of, I'd say, complexity and cost down our supply chain, including to farmers, agricultural growers, who at the moment do not have their heads around Scope 3 reporting and what will be required and how they'll do it and how they'll resource it. And look, it's an important thing to do, but I think the focus very much needs to be on focusing on the solutions to reduce our impact, not paying consultants to help us develop reports.
Excellent, thank you.
Question?
No,
What do you think? What else can we talk about?
actually, I will just ask something with regards to that waste reduction. How, and like it's all very well to say that you'll be able to recycle it, but how are you going to get those wrappers and all of that back? Is that going to be something that you have bins around at supermarkets or?
Yeah, so it's we've been working with the Australian Food and Grocery Council, and we were a member of their, I'd say, pilot phase of an extended producer responsibility scheme. So they piloted household collection in a number of areas around Australia, including sort of metro suburbs and regional towns, to understand how can they collect this in a feasible way. And I believe stage 2 of that trial has just kicked off. Coles and Woolworths also have just restarted a return to store collection as well, but it's only in 13 stores at the moment. It's very, very limited, and they still also have the collection pile to manage that they inherited as part of the Red Cycle collapse. So I think they're looking at sort of their return to store in quite a staged way to make sure they're not stockpiling while they've still got the stockpile to contend with. I think for us, our business firmly believes that for soft plastic to be collected at scale, it needs to be at a household level. Like all too often, I know I go to the supermarket and I think, oh, I forgot my soft plastics at home, and it's quite a different behaviour. Our research also shows that despite the total life cycle of plastic sometimes being better than paper, consumers typically think that paper is better because they can recycle it at home in their recycle bin. So, and there's huge benefits of plastic. It leads to reduced food waste, it protects the products better. As you'll see in high-speed manufacturing environments today, the output that you can get with soft plastic is much faster than paper. So there's significant benefits, but yet we do have a waste and a collection challenge and a processing challenge that still needs to be solved.
I mean, in Queensland, I think other states, you have the, return the bottles for 10 cents.
Yes.
You wonder if you could expand that, and when people take their bottles in, they can take their plastics in as well. That would be a way of sort of resolving it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the challenges with the different plastic types is the value in the end market, and soft plastic has a lower value than your bottles and your cans and glass, unfortunately. But yes, my children are fully on board with return to the machine for their 10 cents.
It's a good little earner and kept the kids going.
It is.
Innovation is obviously a key part. Tell me what exciting stuff's going on, or what you're looking at for into the future in manufacturing.
Yes, so digitisation is probably the big thing that's happening in manufacturing. And when we go through the Cadbury plant today, our head of supply chain can talk to you much more in depth around some of the digitisation projects that we have in the pipeline. So looking at sort of, are there ways that technology can, I'd say, speed up the lines or reduce to sort of more defects. So for example, at our Philadelphia plant in South Australia, we have like visual identity checks. So there's a camera there that looks at, okay, is the Philadelphia cream cheese in the tub correctly? Is the foil on? Is the lid on, etc.? And it knows when to reject a product. We acquired a business called Gourmet Food about 3 years ago in Melbourne. So they make Olena's Bakehouse premium crackers. I'll come and talk about premium in a moment. But again, the robotics on that biscuit manufacturing line, you've got a claw that picks up a product, but the claw can also identify whether the biscuit is not to spec and should be rejected in the manufacturing line. So there's more opportunity to invest in that digitisation to drive the productivity, better meet consumer needs, and reduce waste. On gourmet food, that was an interesting transition because it was a premium product category. Cadbury Dairy Milk is very much an everyday family brand. And we acquired gourmet food because we saw particularly an export potential for that product. So these are biscuits that retail for about $6 a packet. They're crackers with nuts, dried fruit and seeds that you put on a cheese board and put your delicious cheese on. And that business has huge export potential. And so it's difficult for a family brand at an everyday price point to compete in overseas markets. But premium brands at a premium price point, as we're seeing with gourmet food, has great potential overseas in many markets. So I think if you nail that sort of premium product and the premium offering, I think that's got great growth potential overseas.
Cool. Any further?
It's really interesting.
I would like to ask one question, but I think you'll struggle to answer it. What are all the products you have?
700. 726, I know.
Yep. Very good.
I
I'd expect you to do that.
I would absolutely struggle.
What's your favourite?
Yeah, definitely the Cadbury Dairy Milk block with hazelnut. And I always keep it in the fridge so the hazelnuts are just a little bit crunchier as well.
Pro tip.
Pastel marshmallows, the pink ones. Good on the fire. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was great. Really appreciate it. So
Yes, absolutely.
you'll be sent a copy of the transcript to make any corrections to that transcription. Is there anything else? Well, we'll close the hearing.
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you.